Good afternoon and welcome back. We'll start this session with an opening scenario. So let us assume it's 10:15 a.m. on a Monday morning in Lagos and the board risk committee of a financial institution is in session. They already have an agenda which is to discuss the Q4 financial performance of the financial institution. Also, compliance and regulatory updates, and finally, the credit risk trend. All of a sudden, the company secretary receives a note that she passes to the chairman. The chairman is amazed, surprised, and pauses. What? We've just been informed that our digital banking platform has been unavailable since morning. At first, board members were surprised and took it to be a simple operational issue. So the meeting continued. But within 30 minutes, information started coming in. There were so many complaints on social media. The company could no longer afford to ignore the complaints. Customers were unable to make transfer. Merchants started calling in, their payments were delayed. And their payment gateway flagged unusual activities. So the board turned to management and said, what's the real problem? And nobody could give a clear and precise answer. So the chairman asked, are customers' money at risk? Is this within our approved risk tolerance? What is the potential financial exposure per hour for the downtime? No answer. From management, no answer. But the CISO, trying to be the confident man, says we detected anomalies, there were traffic patterns, and the chairman says, stop, I do not understand technology. In clear terms, what is the solution? So this scenario can play out in any financial institution. But the question is, how will the CISO react? Will he just start with technical jargons, or would there be a better way to address such scenarios? So this session is more like a summary of all what we've been discussing in the past 3 days. So the CISO can have a practical guide on how best to deal with the board. So let's get started. So cyber risk is a board issue, and we have to know that it's no longer an IT issue. Yes, people feel that IT has a role to play, but in more advanced and matured organization, IT is also separated from the CISO. So, as a CISO, you need to position cyber risk the same way financial stability and regulatory risk should be addressed. It shouldn't be an isolated event that is dealt with by only the IT team. Because if you want the board to really understand how important cyber risks are, you should also explain it in a way and manner that they see the financial loss, they see that customers' trust is also a capital that should be protected. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your core banking services will be functional even when you have cyber attack, because you have not just the technology, but you've simulated such situations and you have alternative when you are exposed to risk. So what are the things we should avoid when we are discussing cyber risk with the board? Don't downplay regulatory and supervisory implication. Sometimes CISO try to downplay some of these things and treat cyber risk as just an infrastructure or IT issue. Don't do that. Try as much as possible to make the board see that they have a role to play and they understand cyber risk the same way they understand customer acquisition, market risk, FX risk, so that they can see it as a necessity. Now, you need to treat cyber risk as a core component of your enterprise and operational risk. That simply means that you have to assign a formal cybersecurity oversight role and obligation to the board. You also need to have a board and risk or audit committee. Not every organization has this committee, and even if they do, how effective is the committee? So ensure that cyber risk are documented and actions that emanate from any form of cyber risk has documentation to back it up. And as an organization, you should have a risk appetite. What are you willing to tolerate? At what point will you reach your risk threshold? You should be able to define those things. What you should also avoid is making reports that lacks evidence or any form of oversight. And don't just have informal cyber risk implementation. There's what they call informal, whereby it's verbal, no documentation. And make sure that you have your processes in case regulators come so that you can be able to go through their examination without fear or padding. You see, some CISOs, once in a while, if you interact with them, you will laugh because they will tell you how they sometimes manufacture reports just to meet regulatory need. But that shouldn't be the best approach. So try as much as possible to formalize your cyber risk procedures. Now, for this session, I would want to take as much question as possible because some of the questions you may have may also be related to what we've discussed in previous sessions. So feel free to drop any question you feel you have. We'll try and answer them to the best of our knowledge. So we expect more questions in this session so that we'll make it more interactive. Now, you need to know that you must have some line of defense, and that's why the board has a responsibility. It's like making a transaction, you need to have some level of controls. Maybe somebody initiate, somebody review, somebody approve, not just a one channel. So what that means is that for your cyber risk governance, you have to have a structure so you can maintain the regulatory requirements through documentation. So if you have a committee responsible, their role has to be spelled out. So at the end of the day, whatever the CISO is doing, it is based on the company policy, either by information security policy, risk management policy, data protection policy. So this policy should also be harmonized so there are no overlap and they meet regulatory needs. Because when a CISO operates informally, there are tendency for issues to be kept and avoided. So if an issue becomes difficult to resolve, the CISO may not take action. But when you have other people as line of defense for the organization, good example is the board, the risk management committee. This helps the CISO to know that there are people watching actions he or she makes. So don't have weak independence for cybersecurity oversight. Even if the board is too busy, send them their report via email. Let it be evidence that yes, that report was sent. And don't remove cyber risk from your internal audit scope. Cyber risk should be part of internal audit oversight also. And there should be clear gap between IT risk, compliance, and security. Some organizations may not be able to afford this because of limited staff, but for organizations that can afford it, there should be clear roles demarcation so that there are no overlap. Because imagine if you have one person as your data protection officer, that same person is the CISO, that same person is the head of IT. You never can tell where one person's role starts and when that person's other role finishes because this person is taking multiple roles. So of course there will be ineffectiveness in that. So try as much as possible to separate these roles. They may also look similar, but they have different obligations to different regulators. Now, we talked about risk appetite. Now, you must define your cyber risk appetite. What are you willing to tolerate? And there must be threshold. What's the threshold for customer data breaches? What's the threshold for service unavailability? What's the threshold for financial loss? What's the threshold for regulatory penalties? This has to be defined. A good example is service unavailability, and you say, okay, we cannot tolerate a downtime that exceeds an hour. So, irrespective of whether it is as a result of power failure or internet service, it mustn't exceed an hour. An hour may also be too far in some organizations that operate in urban centers. Imagine if customers had to wait for 60 minutes to get solutions resolved. So another organization can say, okay, we can tolerate downtime that exceeds 15 minutes. And when you have such threshold, it means you must have multiple power supply, you must have multiple internet service providers, you must also have effective backup. So define your thresholds. As a CISO, you should see this as building your career, not just working for the organization. Because when you are effective, when you do the right thing, over time you gain a lot of skill that you outgrow where you are and you get better offers because that current role you are feeling is more like your learning curve. So at some point you outgrow it and you want to go for bigger opportunities, bigger opportunities. And how do you fit into a bigger opportunity when you've not been learning, when you've not been practicing? It becomes difficult. So try as much as possible to go beyond your normal task so you are effective. So when opportunities come for better roles, which will always come, you would be prepared. You have the skill set, you have the knowledge, you have the contact. So that's my own piece of advice. If you look at your role as a burden and you don't want to grow on it, you don't want to learn, you don't want to improve, you will get it wrong. So even if your organization doesn't have such policy, you can try as much as possible to help them develop it. If they don't have such threshold, try to talk to management why these things have to be established. They may look at it that, oh, you are working hard on your job, but you're also learning and improving yourself. So don't have a broad risk appetite. Let me put it this way. You come and say, okay, we will not tolerate downtime without defining timeline or actionable costs. When you have a broad risk appetite, it doesn't make sense. You can't measure it. You can't evaluate when you've reached it. Imagine you say, we will not tolerate data breach. Okay, you will not tolerate data breach, but a staff is an insider threat. So you can't measure that. But if you come and say, okay, we are not going to allow staff access our resources using flash drive, that is something you can measure. That's something you can evaluate. That's something you can detect. So automatically, flash drives are not accepted as a working tool. You say, okay, we are not going to tolerate any regulatory penalty that exceeds 500,000. So that puts your compliance team on their toes that anything that exceeds 500,000, somebody has to take responsibility. So make your risk appetite measurable, never broad, never subjective. And don't assume that because you have all the firewalls in the world that your system will not be breached. There are no foolproof system, not even commercial banks, not even the big tech. So why do you think your own system is foolproof? So try as much as possible to know that risk exists and have mitigating controls. And before we go further, one key thing you must know is when you have backup offline, it is gold because even if your system gets compromised and you have backup and you can access those backup, that will be valuable. So backup are key for you to be resilient. So try as much as possible to have backup for all your system. Real-time backup will be the best because if you don't have a real-time backup, imagine what goes wrong and your backup is as far back as 30 days. So it means that you are willing to lose 30 days of work. So try as much as possible to incorporate real-time backup offline also. That will help you as a CISO. So when you explain cyber risks to your board members, try as much as possible to make it scenario based. Don't be too technical with them. Let them know that there is always a residual risk. These are risks that remains after you've implemented all controls that you have. And those residual risks must be well managed. And try as much as possible to quantify losses. If we have a data breach, this is what it will cost us in financial terms. That makes it easier for them to understand. So don't be too technical, just as I said. Don't ignore residual risk. Describe risk in financial context. That will help you as a CISO. Talking about communicating cyber risk, you need to know one thing. Poor incident handling will expose your business. And always ascribe risk to regulatory need and obligations. Know one thing, customer trust is capital. Your brand reputation is king, and you do not want regulatory sanctions. So, if certain guidelines requires you report cyber risk or data breach, that should be known to all staff. So, if any staff detects anomaly, data security incident, they would let you know and you could now do your due diligence to see if it falls within the reporting threshold. Now, a lot of CISOs may also escalate fear, not risk. So try and make sure that whatever you're escalating exists. Don't just raise alarm that is false, and come up with mitigating control. Because if you say, okay, our software is not secured, what's the solution? If you say the vendor has not done ABC, what should have been done? And what were the controls put earlier? So, whenever you raise any risk, always come up with a mitigating control. That makes you to be effective as a CISO. And one thing I know about being a CISO is that you gain more experience over time. While you are more detailed at your job, you will notice that you are learning not just the technical aspect, but also the business, procurement, the analytic, and every aspect of being a CISO. Because being a CISO is filling multiple roles in one job schedule. So keep your questions coming in. We will go for the quiz, and I believe after the quiz, we are going to have lots of questions to address. Just as I said, I want this session to be more focused on you. So drop as much questions as you can. We'll try our best to answer those questions. So, what is the first question? Yeah. In financial institutions, why is cyber risk treated as a board level issue than an IT issue? So, we have option A, B, C, and D. So, you can choose any of the options that you feel is correct. Okay, there's a question here that's interesting. Can organization merge CISO, head of IT, and data controller as one person if they operate in only one branch? Okay, now a data controller is defined as an entity or individual who determines why data is being processed. So the individual will not be regarded as a data controller if he or she is on a payroll and holding a job as the CISO. So I believe your question should be if the head of IT can also be the CISO in a unit tier 2 bank. Let me use that example. Yes, the law accepts that. If you read the CBN guideline, that is accepted. But how effective is it? And some of the tier 2 banks may not really, I'm talking about the microfinance that operate in rural communities. They may not be able to employ large amount of people because of payroll. So while you are holding that job, just know that it's not the best approach and it's not going to be effective. Even you yourself, it will tell on your health. So that may be done, but it's not the best. So I can see a lot of B in the answer section. So let's see if that is the answer. Yes, B is actually the answer. Cyber incidents can disrupt critical financial services, cause regulatory sanctions, impact capital adequacy, and expose directors to liability, making cyber risk a board level governance issue. So we'll go to the next question. Which of the following best describes board ready cyber risk reporting in regulated sectors? Which of the following best describes board ready cyber risk reporting in regulated sectors? So we have option A, B, C, and D. Okay, I can see option C. Can see another C. So C is actually the answer. So boards require risk-based, decision-oriented reporting that demonstrates oversight, alignment with risk appetite, and regulatory defensibility, not technical detail. Question 3 says, which cyber risk metric is most relevant for a board of a financial institution? Which cyber risk metric is most relevant for a board of a financial institution? So, what is the most appropriate answer? So, we have option A, option B, option C, and D. Please keep dropping your questions so that we can make this session more interactive. You can ask any question, even if it's not part of this session. If it's the previous session, you are free to drop. So I can see option C. Let me see how true it is. Is correct. So board focus on financial exposure, business continuity, and regulatory impact. Technical activity metrics do not support strategic decision making at that level. So we go to question 4. What is the primary purpose of defining a cyber risk appetite in a regulated financial institution? What is the primary purpose of defining a cyber risk appetite in a regulated financial institution? So we have option A, B, C, and D. Mr. Tolu, I can see your answer. C. So let's see how true it is. C is correct. So risk appetite clarifies how much cyber risk is acceptable when escalation is required and enables boards to exercise effective oversight. So we have the fifth question. During a significant cyber incident, what does a board level incident report in a financial institution primarily focus on? During a significant cyber incident, what does a board level incident report in a financial institution primarily focus on? So we have option A, B, C, and D. So let's see what the answer is. It's C also. So board requires clarity, control, and assurance, focusing on impact, compliance obligation, and management action rather than technical diagnostics. So, with that being said, I think it's time for discussion. So, drop any question you want. I want this final session to be about you. You ask your questions, we'll try as much as possible to answer them. As regards your certificates and the slides, by Monday, you'll get an email, and also on the WhatsApp group, I will post how you can access the slides and the materials. So, that is it. So please drop your questions. We have 30 minutes. If the questions are effective, strong, and good, we can run through additional 10 minutes. So we have 30 minutes. If you have any question, you can drop it and we'll answer it so we can discuss. Okay, there's a question here. Please, do you have a reporting template for cybersecurity reports to the board? Do you have a reporting template for cybersecurity report to the board? Okay, I will look into that and see how I can get that across. So keep the questions coming in. I'll take note of that at the. I remember I posted the annual budget on the group. So I'll look into that and get that across. Please keep your questions coming in and we'll try our best to answer them. If you have any question as relates to cybersecurity, data protection, risk management, you can drop it. This is the opportunity for you to air your view so we can discuss. Okay, is CISO only limited to financial institution? What of real estate? No, the CISO role is not limited to financial institution. Every industry has cybersecurity risk as long as they connect to the internet. Now, financial regulations makes it mandatory for institutions in that sector to implement controls at minimum. So even a hospital can have a CISO because most likely they will be facing ransomware attack or phishing attack or unsolicited emails. So they need somebody to fill that role. So irrespective of the sector you operate, you need a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer. The only advantage financial institutions have is that they are well regulated. In fact, they are over regulated in some instances. So that is why you see enforcement of that role. Good. So a real estate company can have a CISO. I have another question here. When a financial institution is unable to hire more staff and the IT officer is handling all the functions, what can be your advice in terms of overlap function and workloading? It's just, well, I would say is to put the guy in prayer. Because see, I've been in this industry for some years and I know one person cannot fit into all this role and be effective. It's not possible because you have your own job role primarily. These are added roles because of regulatory requirements. So there will always be an overlap. You understand? But some people can excel because they are more dedicated, but still yet they will not play at that 100% because you have limited time, 24 hours. So it's just for the company to find a way to balance it. But what I can also advise is try to see how you can automate some of your tasks. If you can use technology, so if technology can assist you in some of those tasks, then you can do some human supervision that can help. You understand? If not, you'll find it difficult to toggle those rules. Okay, someone is saying we should reshare the annual reporting budget template. Okay, I'll share that again on the WhatsApp group. That's not a problem. So please, is there a standard reporting template for weekly reports to the managing director in the microfinance bank? Now, there's no standard template for reporting to the MD for microfinance bank, but you can come up with a template. You can come up with a template. It's something you can do. Yeah, if you report to your MD weekly, that makes sense. When I was in the public sector, we usually prepare a report weekly, every Friday, before I left the public sector. So that's something nice. That's good. What's the next question? How often? I'm going to see this question. Okay, someone is saying, how often should the CISO send cybersecurity report to the board, monthly or quarterly? Now, I've answered this question in previous training. Now, not every organization is equal. You may be in the same sector. It's like using a tier one fintech with a tier two MFB. They are all seen as other financial institutions, but power pass power. I want to use that word. So now, in A company where you have technology acquisition that is high, you don't expect to be reporting every quarter. It only makes sense that you report either weekly or monthly. Because if you are reporting every quarter, incidents would have gone wrong before the board is even aware. So that is where your cybersecurity maturity comes in. So if you are a little bit advanced in technology acquisition, you could be reporting to your board on a weekly basis. But a small financial institution trying to manage a rural community may do that report every quarter, and it will not pose any significant damage. So, yes, the regulatory body may put quarterly basis, but those are minimum standard, minimum requirements. In commercial banks, for example, they could make it every 2 weeks. So you need to look at your technology use. You also need to look at your staff strength because somebody has to draft this report. So if you add all these metrics together, how we use technology, how exposed are your infrastructure. Take for example, you have core banking applications. That is another security risk. So you don't expect to report with the guy who is just doing manual. So it is not a rule of thumb that you do quarterly or monthly, but you need to look at your risk exposure, right? So that's it. If you have filled the CBN Excel template, you understand what I'm saying. When you finish filling those questions, it gives your institution a rating, and that rating is what should even determine some of this reporting. Okay, the other questions here. Mm, okay, okay. I think the questions I've tried to answer all the questions. Please, if there are other questions, you can ask. If not, I will take it that there are no more questions. But my advice to CISO is this: there are so many free resources online you can use to develop yourself. If you go to YouTube, there are free resources out there. There are some websites that have a lot of good resources. If you follow through with those resources, give yourself a 12-month period. I want to upskill myself to be effective as a CISO. I believe you'll find better opportunities because some CISOs I've interacted with, they are very good. And sometimes they find themselves in wrong location. I remember we did a training in Lagos and some people came from a particular section and they did better than people that were in the urban area. And I asked myself, why are these guys still in that location? So sometimes you need to change your location as a CISO sometime to be able to get better opportunities, right? So, but that's just a personal advice anyway. These guys were good. They understood cybersecurity far, 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 far better than those guys who were in the urban area. So sometimes you also need to change your location as a CISO for better opportunities. Okay, so if there are no questions, I really appreciate everyone who has dedicated their time to this weekend session. It's a weekend, and we know what weekend mean to IT professionals. Those are times whereby we have workload, but we still have to find time to rest. So I really appreciate you for being on this session. I will repost the annual budget immediately after this on the WhatsApp group. And by Monday, I believe we should get a mail on how to access our slides. The beauty about the slide is that you can use it to do retraining in your organization. Yeah, you can use it to do retraining. So we'll try our best to see how we can communicate that so that by Monday you get it. So thank you, everyone. And until we meet again, I believe that you have learned something tangible within these last 3 days. Myself, I've also learned from your questions. So thank you very much and enjoy your weekend.